Welcome to LITE It Up, a podcast about resilient women balancing motherhood, their careers, personal lives, and all of the challenges that come along with being a superwoman. Each week, you'll be motivated to take action to lead, inspire, transform, and empower. Now, here's your host, Dr. Aginah Musherah. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of LITE It Up. I am your host, Dr. Aginah Musherah. I want to thank you for tuning in to another episode. I have a very exciting show for you this week. We're going to talk about something a little bit more serious because you all know that's typically my motto with LITE It Up, is to make sure that I'm sharing something that's going to be focused on inspiring and empowering each one of you. It is my honor and pleasure to have Tikia Travis on today as my guest. And I'll tell you a little bit about Tikia before I formally introduce her. But Tikia is, she's a 25-year-old Chicago native, and she is a recent graduate from the University of Illinois at Chicago. Actually, she just finished her master's degree in English education. She also is an alum, completed her undergraduate degree at UIC. And I had the pleasure of meeting Tikia probably about 6 years ago, I think, 6.5 years ago, when I was the director of the Office of First Year Initiatives. Tikia was one of my student employees and then became my mentee. And I like to call her my daughter, I guess, because sometimes I go into mama mode when I am at work with my students. But now I have been blessed to watch her grow and become a young professional adult. And there was no way that I could end season one or end this first year of my podcast without having Tikia on as my guest. So I would like to welcome you, Tikia Travis, to LITE It Up. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. This is so exciting.
I'm glad you did it. So, one of the reasons why you are here is because great news, you just finished your master's in English education at UIC, which is awesome. You know, I am an advocate for higher ed or an education in general. But I wanted you to come on just to talk about your experience, talk about what you're doing and what your future plans are since you've completed your degree. So if you'd like to just take a moment just to kind of tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, hello, everyone. And again, thank you, Dr. Muhammad, for having me on this show. I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity. It's interesting. I always never know where to start with, like, where am I going? But how I started, um, as Dr. Muhammad mentioned, I am a 25-year-old Chicago native, a two-time alumna from UIC. And I can honestly admit that since I was a very young girl and little girl, I always said, I'm going to get my PhD. I have to become something more. I have to do more. So I've always had this drive to pursue higher education. I am the first person in my family, my immediate family, that has obtained a master's degree. So for me, that's very important. And I've had the amazing honor of sharing this moment and this experience with my mom, my siblings, my stepdad. And though my biological dad, he passed away during my first year of college, I am so excited that I've been able to do this because I know that he would be very proud of the accomplishment that I've made. And as of right now, since I have finished my degree program, I am still in progress or planning what will come next. So that's what I'm doing right now. This is my time of just kind of resolve, where I can take a minute and just step back and say, okay, I don't have to be extremely hands-on with everything, but by top of year, I do have some plans that I'm already working on right now. As far as starting my program, I began my degree for the Master's of Arts in English Education in fall of 2018. I originally did not know that I would be interested in the English education concentration. I was an English studies major within my program. and I took one class where we discussed schooling and literacy. And I thought that the subject was so interesting because as I do work as an admissions counselor for UIC's College of Business. And at the time, I worked in our central admissions office, and I would really look at the process of how students were being evaluated for admission. Students had to meet a certain SI or a certain criteria in order to be admissible. And so I always wondered, how are we really assessing students for the literacy skills that they have if they are not meeting a certain standard as listed by the academy? And so from there, I just became super engaged in the subject of literacy and started doing my own personal research. And after being in my master's program for one semester, the following semester, I requested to switch over to English education, not with the intention of completing the licensure track to teach within a high school or an elementary school. I would rather look at the research portion of literacy. And I know some people say, well, that's ed policy. And I think that when you talk about literacy, you can't talk about literacy without doing research, without being a teacher, without having all of these different experiences. But in my case, I'm really interested in Black student literacy and what that looks like, and how students are able to use their identities and experiences to present the literacy skills that they have. So I am interested in amending the current definition of literacy, which is very fragile and very narrow. I feel like I kind of went on a tangent there, but yeah.
It's okay. And one thing, so I want to backtrack a little bit because I actually want to talk about, start off by talking about the fact that you are a product of Chicago Public Schools.
Yes.
If I recall correctly, you graduated from Simeon.
Yes, I did. Go Wolverines. Let's go.
I'll hold it against you with that school on Vincennes. You know, I'm from the other school on Vincennes,
Yes.
Mustangs. In fact, we just had a battle. It was on Giving Tuesday, which alumni or organization could raise the most money. You know, we won.
Oh, don't tell anybody that I didn't know about it. It's okay.
It's okay. But because I've always told you from the moment that I met you, you reminded me so much of myself from the standpoint that you always had this plan. So as an undergraduate student, I don't know how old you were when we met. What were you?
19.
Okay. Wow. So 19 years old. And I just remember you having like your planner and notebook and trying to figure out what classes you were going to take and what you were going to do. Were you always that driven, focused, and organized in terms of your undergraduate program?
Let's see. The organization came with the undergrad program. As far as being driven and being very focused, I have always been that way. That's something that I can say honestly was instilled in me as a child, where when I would come home from school, the first thing I would do is sit down and do my homework before anything else could get done. During the summer, my eldest sister, Tiffany, she would take me to the library to get books because I love reading. So that's where this love of reading kind of it blossomed. And like I can remember countless times when my mom was like reading, I would randomly go in her room and say, oh, what are you reading? Can I read too? And just kind of like being in those spaces and like sort of having people who are leading by example. And with undergrad, it was after my first semester, after the passing of my dad, where I kind of had to slow down and kind of regroup and figure out, okay, how do I best manage my time? How do I begin getting involved on campus? And actually, my advisor from the undergrad success center at the time, Danica, she said, you need a planner. And I was actually just telling this story to one of my students earlier. Danica said, you're going to walk to Target and you're going to buy a planner. And I was like, walk to Target? And so I went to Target and I bought this like really small planner, the size of the one that I have here now. Mm-hmm. And she said, no, you need something big that you can see. And so I ended up going back and I bought this planner and I just wrote everything out, and I had sticky tabs. And I realized that like having a planner definitely kept me organized, but it also held me accountable to get things done. So if I wrote out week 1 assignments, tests, meetings, if I didn't cross it off, then that means that in a way I'm failing myself because I have it in front of me. So there's no reason why I shouldn't be able to do it. So that's something that pretty much stuck with me. And since then, I've always kept a planner. I've always tried really hard to stay organized, and it helps me to remain focused. Plus, as I get older, I feel like things escape me now. So I have to write things down.
You're too young to forget.
No, uh, they wearing me down. That's why I have to write everything down.
So I know that when we talked about what you were going to do after graduation, you were trying to decide, do I do a master's program? Do I go directly to law school? We talked about so many different things.
Yes.
And I don't know, sometimes when you get to be my age and you see someone who kind of reminds you of how you were when you were a student, um, you want to make sure, of course, that you have your own set of experiences, but if there's a way for someone to help you kind of, save time or navigate certain spaces strategically, I think that, as someone who's older than you, that I had that responsibility. And I just remember I've always said to you, try to get out of Chicago if you can.
Yes.
Try to other programs outside of the city of Chicago and outside of the state. Um, but after graduation, you were fortunate enough to land a full-time position at UIC. Uh,
Yeah.
and talk about just your experience being able to graduate with a degree and then come out of undergrad having a job only a few months after graduating. And what was that experience like in terms of working with students, because you were also in the office of admissions during that time?
Yes, I count it an extreme blessing to have been afforded an opportunity to receive a full-time position at my alma mater, because it afforded me another opportunity to pursue my master's degree just one short year later. But even transitioning out of my undergrad and transitioning into my role as a college recruiter within our central UIC admissions office, being the youngest person on the team definitely for me was, it was like almost like a learning curve, because it was me being in a professional setting and actually being considered a professional amongst these people who had 5 and 7 and 10 years of admissions experience. And one of the things that I was told my first time going into a room full of people who have been at the institution for as long as I've, been alive, is when you go into these rooms, these people have more experience than you.
Mhm.
Sit there, be quiet, listen, and absorb the information. And that's something at the time I didn't understand. Like, oh, why do I have to just sit there and be quiet? And why can't I, give a suggestion? And it's because coming out of undergrad, you feel the need to be needed, because in undergrad, I was always that student who was a part of different organizations, giving advice, helping out at different committee breakfasts and student events. And I was, for the first time, put in a position where I had to just sit back and absorb information and listen and take notes. And that helped me to learn some of the logistics of what it means to be in enrollment management and in admissions and recruitment. And that later afforded me an opportunity to interview for a position in the College of Business. After working in our admissions office for about a year, I later applied to the UIC business recruitment team and also received a position. And even when transitioning into this position, I didn't realize there were still so many things that I still needed to learn. And also learning how to navigate different spaces with different work styles, because everyone does have a different work style. And just like we all have different love languages, that's something that I had to come to understand. And it's definitely been a journey and it's been an experience, but it's one that I've been so grateful for, because it has allowed for me to become a professional in my own right. And I'm still continuing to evolve and learn more about enrollment management, and also apply that to my own research for student preparedness for post-secondary education.
So when you were, because you were always involved as well, um,
Yes.
as an undergraduate student. I remember we also presented at NASPA, and for those who may not be familiar with that organization, that's tuned in. That's the now I'm gonna
National Association for Student.
It's student affairs.
It's definitely student affairs. I can't think of the full name of it right now,
Right.
but research was in the margins of the margins. The undergraduate experiences of African American women, I
In
want to say.
leadership roles and within
Yep.
organizations. Yeah,
Yes.
and that now that was a very interesting time period because with your student involvement in different organizations, you noticed a trend where African American women, in particular, who were involved with some of the student organizations, had a tendency to only hold certain roles
Yes.
within those organizations, which was typically the role of secretary
Yes.
or something in sort of a help mate type of
Role.
role.
And yes, and that was a very interesting time. It's interesting now because one of the same organization that I was a part of, their entire executive board now consists of a full like female young woman executive board, and that's something that I'm so proud of,
Mhm.
because I don't think that women receive the recognition for all that we do, and there's always this sort of, as a woman, you're always trying to like find your place, or show that you're more than enough and show what you're worth. And as a Black woman, it's I'm realizing this now, it's 10 times harder because now you're working not against just your male counterparts, you're working against your white male and female counterparts to prove that your existence is important in order for other people to do their jobs, or in order for you to earn your spot or your place within the academy or whatever professional field that you are in. But we can talk about that all day. We not have to.
And what's interesting is that so you were exposed to that as an undergraduate student, but then it's still somewhat prevalent in your role as a professional. And then the fact that with your master's program, you were, let me get this right, you were one of 4 Black women in your cohort,
Yes.
right? But then you were also the only Black woman in your concentration within the department.
Yes. When I started my master's degree program, there were 4 of us, 4 Black women, 4 Black anybody, 4 Black people in the program.
Mhm.
And before applying into my graduate program, I went and I looked at the data and statistics for how many African American Black men and women apply into the master's degree programs, because that information is made available on the grad college website. And I noticed every year there was a decline in how many were being accepted, how many were applying. And so when I applied, even while working in admissions and having the ability to talk with graduate admissions counselors about what they're looking for in the applications, it was somewhat difficult just because I was wondering, am I going to be accepted? If this is what the trend is, what are my chances of being accepted? And so I was accepted. And I was one of 4 Black women who were admitted into the program. And there are different concentrations for the graduate degree, whether the 2 of the women who are in the program are PhD candidates. My peer, Marissa, she was the other master's student, and she did her master's of English and creative writing in 1 year. And she's now at University of Chicago. And so it just left me, and I decided to change over to English education. And I realized I'm the only Black person in this department. There were no Black faculty members there. It was just me. And it's so interesting because while I didn't realize that at the time, I didn't realize that really until the end of my program, that I took courses from my department, but I was also afforded the opportunity to take courses from the College of Education. And the professors that I've met, even my thesis directors, they were very helpful to me by being the only Black person in my program, by being a young Black woman. They encouraged me to actually read Black scholars, especially for what I was writing about. It's important to make sure that I have people who are doing or who have done similar research and read about what they're saying, because reading just about what white men are saying about literacy, that doesn't help me. It doesn't apply to what the point or the argument that I'm trying to make. So the professors that I did take while I was within my program did in some ways support me to say, hey, this person, do not use him. He goes against everything that you stand for and you believe in. I don't even believe in what he's saying. So let's go back to the drawing board. So that's something that I greatly appreciated.
Do you think, with your experience of being the only Black woman, how did that play onto your psyche in terms of just how you felt going through the program?
I was very concerned. I think that I'm very passionate about the work that I do, the work that I produce. And so when I was going through the program and I'm writing, I felt like what I was writing about wasn't good enough. Is it good enough? Does it make sense? Will this be accepted? How many times am I going to rewrite this? And I can tell you 90% of writing is literally rewriting. And I rewrote my thesis. I probably have 7 drafts of my thesis. And I now have a completed or final version. But even going through that process and working with my directors and, you know, asking them for like constant help and emailing them back and forth, it I always wondered, is what I'm saying going to be accepted? And in my mind, I feel the reason that I'm asking that is because these are white men, and they could easily, if they, you know, weren't who they are, and I'm thankful that they are who they are, but if they weren't who they are and they weren't people who pushed me to read Black scholars, or who encouraged me, or who said, this is an amazing point, expand upon this, or who said, hey, I like the fact that you used James Baldwin and you talked about a pedagogy of love and how that relates to pedagogy of the oppressed by Paulo Freire. Having people or having mentors or thesis directors like that, that was super beneficial to me, because it reaffirmed in me that, hey, what I'm saying, it is important, it does matter. And even though they're white men, they're not using their privilege or their ethnic or their racial groups to in any way stunt my growth. So that's something that I greatly appreciated.
And you touched upon briefly just the notion of imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
And I know just in my conversations with a lot of Black women who are professionals in higher ed and maybe even in some other fields, that many of us can have the degrees, the titles, but there is often a time where we may experience imposter syndrome, not feeling like we're good enough or feeling as if we don't deserve to be at the table, maybe. Um, did you experience any of that within your academic pursuits at UIC or even in the professional space?
I can definitely say my first semester of grad school for sure. I I was completely just at a loss for words. And this is actually something I wrote about in one of the very early drafts of my thesis, about feeling like I had this sort of imposter syndrome, because when you're sitting in classes with students who have very extremely like well put together and elaborate vernaculars, you're
Mhm.
like, wow. In my case, if we're talking about a subject such as literacy, I'm to me, I'm saying, do I need to use such strong vocabulary to get my point across? Or is it okay for me to speak in layman's terms for everyone to understand? And so as I realized that, wow, I'm speaking in a more subtle way that can be easily interpreted by everyone, and everyone else is saying, well, no, we're going to talk about, you know, all, they're elaborating lavishly on like all of these subjects. And I'm like, should I be talking like that? And I remember that by the time I got to the third draft of my thesis, I was using very strong vernacular. I was writing like an academic. I just knew, like, yes, this paper is going to impress them, because they're going to say she's an academic, she belongs here.
Mhm.
And my second reader, my thesis director, Todd, he said, hey, Tikia, he was like, you know, even I feel like an imposter being in this department with people who have years of experience, more years of experience than he. And he said, it's okay. He was like, you can be who you are and you can write how you write. And it's okay as long as you can prove that you understand what you've been learning, and you can come up with an argument or some sort of persuasive like writing piece. you're fine. And that's something that at the time I was like, well, are you sure, Todd? Because if I write like this, I'm going to be considered an academic. They're going to say she belongs here. And so I had to kind of get out of my own way and get out of my own head and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to write about this. Either you're going to like it or you're not going to like it. And I still think that there are, of course, proper ways of writing, of course. And I never really lost track of writing in a proper format that, is set forth in the standards of academic writing. However, I did have to remember to use my own voice in my paper. And that was something that I lacked in my earlier drafts. And I really didn't find it until these later drafts where I said, hey, just write and it'll make sense. So I definitely felt like an imposter earlier on, just because so many other people just seem, oh, well, I came from SUNY and I came from the University of Chicago. And I'm just like, you came from where? What are you doing here?
Yeah.
Why are you here? Just kind of feeling that way. And I think that also goes to me only having the experience of being a student at UIC. And that even goes back to this cycle of being a CPS student and coming from a CPS school that was not a selective enrollment or a gifted program. And so I'm like, well, I just came from like a regular CPS high school. It's known for sports. And, if you make it to college, great. And even at that time in high school, I kind of had that imposter syndrome where I said, well, okay, staying in Chicago is good enough for me. Like, I don't have to leave and I'll be okay. And it's like lately, really towards the completion of this master's degree, I said, wow, like, girl, you got this. Like, I have it. I don't really know why I've been holding myself back from applying elsewhere. But even as I mentioned earlier, in preparing for what's next, I've already begun looking at programs outside of Illinois that I'm super excited about. And even in pursuit of my next program, I understand that it's important for the research that I would like to do to make sure that the programs I'm looking into have faculty and scholars who are doing similar research, because if not, then I'm kind of wasting my time.
So it sounds like you've made up in your mind you're going to go the PhD route and not the JD route.
It's to be decided. I've actually been looking at a few JD PhD programs, because I know some there are some JD MA programs or JD MED programs, and then there are very few JD PhD tracks, which does take roughly about 5 or 6 years or so, because you still have to do your dissertation, you still have to take all of your JD courses. So right now, since October of this year, I've been slowly studying for the LSAT. And this is something I've been talking about all week with my mom and my sister, and really just my entire family. Like, oh, should I do this? Am I going to do this? Maybe I'll do this. But I have made up in my mind that come January, I will begin studying for the LSAT. Like, that's going to be what I'm putting my focus towards. And I do hope to take my LSAT exam in the summer. Though I took the GRE, I think that the LSAT will give me a better opportunity to be considered for scholarships, to have a better chance at applying to more institutions. So I will be applying to a few schools here in Chicago, of course, of course. But I'm also looking into a few other programs elsewhere. And right now, I have to keep asking myself, what type of law do I want to study? And why do I want to go to law school? And so those are things that I'm like constantly asking myself. And I'm asking myself like every day, like, okay, are you sure about law school? Why? And the day that it comes when I can't answer why, then I don't need to do it. And I don't want to just do it just to do it, because if I'm not passionate about it, then I'll find myself saying, well, I guess I'll go get this PhD, when I could have just gone the PhD route the entire time.
Well, the dual program, the dual degree option is not a bad idea. So I know we'll talk more about that.
Yes.
At some point in time.
Yes.
We're long overdue for our sessions.
Yes, we are. It's been a long year. It's been such a long year.
It has been. You talked about when you were talking about just going through the process of writing your thesis, and when Todd, which I know Todd because he is one of the program coordinators that alternates our teacher education, teaching of English program.
Yes.
But was there something that he said in particular, or did you, I guess the question is, when he was reading through your thesis and you're using all of this strong vernacular, I mean, we all know that you are very articulate and well, But was it something that he read as he was reading, he could tell this is not Tikia, or was there something that you said in your conversation that led him to really see that you were trying to impress some people and not really being true to yourself?
Yes, it was definitely a little bit of both. Todd was one of the first professor's courses that I took in my grad program. And so for Todd to have seen my earlier writings and writing about um, like any assignment that I had in his course, like he's very good with giving you feedback, and feedback, whether it is critiquing you so that way you can improve, or just saying, hey, this is a great point. He's very direct. And that's something that I think that that's something I thrive on, just knowing like what direction to go. It helps me to navigate that sort of space. And Todd said, I'm not sure about that. And so like comments like that, I'm like, okay, so can you say more about that? And he'll say, yeah, well, I just, up here you said this and this was really great, and then it's kind of like it's repetitive down here, and you don't need that here. You've already said that. I think what you can do is reorganize. And so Todd was very big on making sure that my paper was structured. And to be honest, right now I'm still like I haven't gone back to read my thesis just for myself, for like without looking at it with academic eyes and just like, oh, is it right, um, but I'm still not sure, like, is my paper organized enough? Like, I still kind of have that lingering feeling, but I think that if it weren't, I'm really sure that Todd and Dave both would not have signed off on it
Right.
at all.
Absolutely. They would not have allowed you to
Right.
continue on. But that is interesting, that you bring all of this up, because it's actually bringing back some memories for me when I was going through my doctoral program. And it was really important to me when I decided that I was going to pursue a PhD. I know I've shared this with you before, that I did attend law school for 1 year. I attended John Marshall, and then I got married and thought, oh, I'll put that on hold and start a family. And then I ended up getting the PhD. But when I went through my program, it was very important for me to work with a dissertation committee chair who could appreciate what I brought to the table in terms of my experience and my interests. And I knew going into the program, though it was an organizational leadership program, that my dissertation topic was going to focus on Black women. And then I also wanted to touch on the mentoring piece. And I can tell you that when you have advisors, faculty advisors who will give you the space to pursue your interests, that makes a difference in terms of
Exactly.
experience going through the program. And so that's the one thing that I could appreciate when I was going through my program. But when I was writing my dissertation, I kept questioning myself and second guessing myself, is this good enough? And I don't know where that comes from in terms, I don't know if it's a sense of, you want to get things right and you want everything to be perfect, that you begin to kind of overthink and second guess yourself.
Mhm.
But how do you feel now? I guess now that you've accomplished this goal, you've written your thesis, you've graduated. Your ceremony was just this past weekend,
Yes.
virtual ceremony. How do you feel now? Like, do you feel like a weight has been lifted? Do you no longer feel like you're an imposter, that you do belong in the academic community?
Honestly, I don't think it feels real yet, just because it has been a very long experience and a very tiresome and daunting experience of just like getting to the point of actually having the thesis submitted.
Mhm.
And statistically, when we think about being a Black woman, being a CPS graduate, a product of CPS, and really just stopping there, statistically, I wasn't supposed to make it this far. I just want to leave that out there. I wasn't supposed to make it. That's what statistics say.
Right.
And I am proud to say that I have definitely beat the statistics, and that I hope that I'm able to encourage other young Black women and the other young Black students. For the first time, I guess I'm not sure if I'm not an imposter. Like I know this. I know that I'm not an imposter, but I'm asking myself, at what point did we start believing that we were not enough,
Mm.
or that we don't qualify for positions, or we should not try to enter rooms that we deserve to be in? And I don't know where that comes from. And maybe it's like sort of that childhood upbringing where it's like, you have to be the best, you have to be 10 times better. And it's like, why do I have to work so hard? I'm tired. Like, I'm tired already, right? And so this is definitely an accomplishment for me. I think that it's still, the residue is still there. It's like settling. And I'm believing that at the top of the year, I'll say, oh, no more classes. But I'm also this person. I was like, oh, maybe I should take a class for fun. But then the other part of me said, girl, just take a break. Like,
For a minute, please.
yeah, take a break. So I'm taking a break. I'm super excited about that. And when I read my own paper, I guess I'll be able to answer if I'm an imposter or not. I just don't believe that they would have accepted the paper and let the paper be submitted to the grad college and to the department if it was not a good paper. So, yeah, I'm definitely not an imposter, guys.
You're an imposter. And I think that's what more of us have to actually um, come to believe, that we are not imposters. And actually, what I have found in my experience, and I'll tell you why I have felt like, and people probably wouldn't believe this even as I am about to say this, that I have felt like an imposter in certain spaces. And the reason, but I can identify why I have felt that way. And primarily it has been because in every space that I've been in, I've been the youngest one. So I was, when you were talking about when you first began working in the Office of Admissions and you were the youngest person on staff, I think about when I was an undergrad student at UIC, I was 16 years old as a freshman. So everyone that I interacted with was 18 and up. I mean, I had friends who were 7 years older than me, and I'm a freshman, so I didn't really feel like, I didn't feel, like I was meant to be there or supposed to be there because I was so young. And then I had tunnel vision in terms of I had goals where I wanted to finish school on time, finish my undergrad degree on time. So I went to school year round. Um, and then in the workplace, professionally, as it turns out, I ended up being the youngest person, the
Yep.
with a master's degree, having the same level of education as my counterparts who worked for Chicago Public Schools for like 10, 20 years. Well, I had a master's at, I think I may have been 21, 22. No, I was 22, I believe. And just being in those spaces. So I always felt like I either need to prove that I deserve to be here, or I don't have enough experience because of my age. So my age was always this barrier that, kept me believing that I was an imposter and didn't belong here. And even in this setting now, professionally, in many spaces, I am the only Black woman. Still got the age as, a factor because faculty is significantly older than I am, but I've been in the workforce for over 20 years working in some form of education. And so I think the key is to recognize what is that underlying issue that makes us believe that we're an imposter or we don't, belong there. And then once you identify it, then work on ways of combating that.
Mhm.
So there are times where I will use my age and my experience to say, hey, well, just like you have 20 plus years of experience working in this field, I have 20 plus years working in this experience and in this field too, but I got started early, so I have to do that in order to pull myself out of that deep, dark hole that we can often find ourselves in,
Yes.
and feeling that way. Um, so I'm saying that to you so that as you continue to pursue, whether it's the JD, the PhD, or a dual program or what have you, just make sure that you remember that you have the skills, the experience, to be in any room. And oftentimes, if you talk to those other people who are in the room that you may think, um, you know, deserve to be in certain spaces, if you really press them on it, they're suffering from imposter syndrome as well.
I can believe that. I can definitely believe that.
What is so you are working in the College of Business, you're preparing for your next um, move in terms of academic pursuits.
Yes.
Is there anything that you feel like from your experience, just, academia and professionally, that you can share for a share with the audience? There may be, most of the people who tune into the podcast are somewhere between the 35 and 44-year mark, but there are younger listeners as well. For those who are maybe interested in pursuing a degree, or going into the field of, English education, who knows? Do you have any words of wisdom, any tips that you could provide people, especially since you do work in the admissions recruitment arena, that sort of thing?
Yes. So I actually have the opportunity. I keep saying, I think opportunity is my word of the day. I'm just like super for certain that it is. But on my graduation post, we had an opportunity to kind of use a quote or create your own. And so I said, the journey is always long until it is finished. Even then, it is just the beginning and you are just becoming. Always move forward. And to me, that just means that it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter how much experience you have or don't have, you still have the ability, as long as you have your health and your strength and you have the determination to do so, keep moving forward. And the journey, it's going to be long, it's going to feel long, but I think that when you get to the end and you see what you've been able to accomplish, then you'll be ignited to continue moving forward and always give back to others. I think that this is an awesome opportunity, being on your platform and sharing my knowledge and sharing my experience. I'm hoping that this is really pouring into someone else who could be older or younger, and that they will take the time to go pursue anything that they have been holding back on, and that they'll also do what you did, and they'll get themselves a mentee and make sure that they stay on their X and finish their degree program.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I told you this. I I will say that it has certainly been a pleasure, and I said this when we started. It's been a pleasure just to watch you because I've seen how you have just evolved, um, and I am so very proud of you. So, of course, just knowing everything that you've gone through and how you tried to weigh different decisions about different programs or what you were going to do, and I just appreciate the fact that you trust me enough to ask my, opinion and my thoughts on different decisions that you're going to make. Um,
We definitely need to have some of our meetings because it's been a very long year.
no, I know. We'll have to have a Zoom lunch date or something because that's the one thing that I certainly miss about us not being on campus because we used to schedule, at least try to schedule a monthly
Lunch.
meeting or something so that we could catch up and figure out what's what and map out next steps.
Yes.
But I know that you are going to continue to do great things. And I just want you to continue to keep that drive. And also make sure that you find someone, whether it's someone at UIC or another institution, the responsibility that you have. Now I sound like I'm going into mama mode. Responsibility that you have to make sure that you get a mentee.
Yes.
Well, because I think that someone, whether it's a young man, young woman, can certainly benefit from your knowledge and from your experience. And I think that's what's so important. You know, oftentimes and you've seen it, I'm sure. Even when we were both in the Office of First Year Initiatives, you know, when you have um, students who
The
are
Sparky's mentor, what Sparky's allies? Was it that?
allies, yeah, and you have students who, you know, their first time even being exposed to higher ed is coming onto a campus as a freshman and just not really knowing how to navigate. And I think that's part of the battle in terms of being successful in pursuing a degree, like knowing how to advocate for yourself, knowing how to navigate different spaces. um, so if there's any way that, you know, you can share what you've learned with another student to help, you know, kind of ease the transition. I mean, we
Yeah.
all have that responsibility. I feel very strongly about that because when I was an undergrad student at UIC, I had a set of advisors actually in AAAN. And I would just actually go in, similar to you, with my notebook, and I would say, these are the classes that I'm taking. This is my rationale behind it. Here's my plan. Like I had a whole little grid. And they would just say, okay. You know, they didn't have to convince me or anything like that. But it took one semester of being knocked down that got me right back on track. But I know that if I didn't have that innate drive and self motivation to kind of, you know, succeed, I could have easily just laid there and not, you know, gotten back.
Mhm.
Um, so, but with the help of just having a support system, that was really beneficial. So, I want you to find a mentee when we get back to campus or even before.
I will.
Any last closing remarks? I'm going to have you. We are going to have another conversation about some other things. But any closing remarks that you have, or any tips, or anything that you want to leave people with? Closing thoughts.
Um, I don't know. I don't. My closing thoughts. I guess my closing thoughts would be: I know that this year has definitely been unlike any other we've definitely experienced, and so it's my hope and prayer that everyone who is under the sound of our voice and who is tuning in, I hope that their year definitely remains safe, well, and I'll see you all in 2021.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Takia, for taking time out of your schedule to talk to me today. And again, congratulations
Thank
on
you.
completion of your program. I'm proud of you. Wow. Thank you so much for joining me today. As always, it's a pleasure just whenever I get a chance to talk to you just for a little bit. So it was so great to see you and to talk to you. And best wishes to you. Enjoy some time of not being in school, please.
Yes, I will. For
take,
now.
take a little break. But so thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode of Light It Up. I hope that you enjoyed listening to Tikia S. Travis. And if you have not already done so, make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe to Light It Up Podcast. You can find the podcast on all platforms, including Apple, Google, and Spotify. We're also on iHeartRadio as well. And you can also check us out on the Light It Up Podcast YouTube channel. All you have to do is type in youtube.com/ Light It Up Podcast, or you can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook. So until next time, and as always, don't forget to continue to light it up and shine bright like a diamond. Thanks for joining me this week on Light It Up. Make sure you visit my website at www.lightituppodcast.com or www.aginahmuhammad.com. You can also find me on social media using the handle at LITE It Up Podcasts. If you like what you've heard, please be sure to hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, I'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or you can simply tell a friend about the show. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a new episode. Until next time, light it up and shine bright like a diamond.